Hi, I'm Ralph Preston, and every Tuesday we have these Stroke Buddies Recovery and Science Zoom meetings, and we try and bring you useful information in your recovery. And I think today's subject on InTandem and how it helps you with your gait will be very useful to everyone out there. And presenting today, we've got Kirsten Smayda, and she's an auditory cognitive psychology researcher by training, and at MedRhythms, she's a medical science liaison and provides information on the education on the science and evidence behind InTandem. Also, we have Chrissy Stack, and she's a neurological music therapist working in support of InTandem as the commercial operations specialist at MedRhythms. Chrissy's been with MedRhythms since 2015 and spent the majority of her time as a clinician in MedRhythms therapy. So thank you both very much for taking your time and sharing your knowledge with us. And what we'd like to tell all of the guests today is that there's a little button at the bottom called Q&A. And if you would type your questions in there, that would be the way. You can do it at any time. They'll get answered appropriately. If we have too many, then we'll answer them after the fact offline. And if you want, I believe you can ask anonymously should for some reason you want to do that. So go ahead, Kirsten, and take it away.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ralph. Let me share my screen here and pull this up. Okay, so Ralph, thank you so much for inviting us into the Stroke Buddies community to talk about InTandem. Thank you for the introduction as well. That saves us a couple minutes on our side. So we first wanted to highlight that our product here InTandem is specifically designed and created for stroke survivors with chronic stroke walking impairment. And we do know that every stroke impacts every patient and family differently, and that everyone's recovery journey is different. As you are part of Stroke Buddies, you're already accessing available support and resources in your community. And our entire team here at MedRhythms is working to support the community with improving access to quality care. So you'll hear us talk about some of the data and the InTandem product, but really we're here to tell you that improving walking is possible months and years post-stroke. To give you a little bit of background on the company that has created InTandem, we are called MedRhythms, and we're based out of Portland, Maine, but we have employees across the country. And we began as a neurologic music therapy program out of Spalding Rehab Hospital in 2015. And our team was seeing such great results, in particularly with one intervention that we'll talk about later today. But when people left the hospital, they were asking for ways to continue the treatment. And at the time, there wasn't a way. And digital was the way to scale the treatment to the people who need it and fundamentally deserve it. So today we aim to cover a few stroke facts that you may or may not be aware of. We're going to talk about InTandem, the product, the evidence behind it, and then we'll talk about next steps in case you're interested to learn more about InTandem. And with that, I will hand it over to Chrissy.
Thank you, Kirsten. So as Kirsten mentioned, we were going to ground ourselves in some stroke facts, and so just have two quick slides here on that. So we know that there are nearly 4 million Americans living with walking impairment after a stroke. There are also 800,000 new strokes every year. And in thinking about those who have served our country, there are 15,000 veterans who are hospitalized each year for a stroke. Clearly, each of you have had your own experience with stroke rehabilitation, and you likely experienced intensive treatment immediately after your stroke. And once you completed outpatient or possibly in-home therapy, access to continued rehabilitative services becomes considerably more limited, whether that be because of insurance, transportation, caregiver availability, or a slew of other reasons, you may have even been told that continued improvement is not likely or not possible. However, we at MedRhythms know that that is simply not true. We have the data to support that that is not true, which Kirsten will mention in a couple slides here. And we're here to talk to you about InTandem and tell you that you are not alone, and InTandem may be a solution for you. And so at MedRhythms, we focus on improving walking because of how important it is for our daily life, but also our future health. So for instance, improved walking can improve quality of life, risk of falls, independence in your daily activities, as well as hospitalizations. So looking at the slide here, our goal is to move our patients from the left side of the chart with slower walking speeds to the right with faster walking speeds, while also improving quality. And doing so allows InTandem patients to move from having limited ambulation, where they can safely move around the area close to their home, to being more fully able to navigate their environment, both safely and independently as a community ambulator. This opens up lots of opportunities to see friends, to go out to dinner, to go to the grocery store, take advantage of resources that are available in your community. So this slide may prompt you to reflect on yourself or loved ones who have challenges with balance and walking, and how that impacts your quality of life, and what improving walking quality and speed might do to help improve those areas. And I'm going to turn it back to Kirsten.
Thanks, Chrissy. So great lead in. So how do we improve people's walking? Well, music and rhythm access our movement and hearing centers of the brain. And when the two systems work together to make movements to music or other sounds that we hear, we call this entrainment. And that's our brain telling our body to move without us even having to think about it. So for example, if you've ever heard a great song that you love and you couldn't help but nod your head or tap your foot without even thinking about it, that's entrainment. It's that unconscious movement of your body to a rhythmic sound, like music. And entrainment has been studied as part of a clinical intervention called rhythmic auditory stimulation, and it's been studied in the lab and clinic for over 3 decades. There's a lot of research supporting rhythmic auditory stimulation, in particular to improve walking and gait. From walking speed to step length and balance, rhythmic auditory stimulation helps retrain the brain to make walking better and easier. And we believe that everyone should have access to this kind of care, which brings us to InTandem.
Thanks, Kirsten. I just want to also bridge that. I think it was last week, Ralph, where we had Caitlin on, who gave a deep dive into rhythmic auditory stimulation. So those that are following the series, InTandem is a device that delivers rhythmic auditory stimulation. So just to pull that through here. So it delivers RAS. InTandem is indicated to improve walking and ambulation, and is intended to be used in the home. So it does ship directly to the patient's home. It has FDA market authorization as a Class 2 prescription-only medical device, and is available in English and Spanish. And based on our clinical trial, the recommended use is 3 times a week for 30-minute sessions for approximately a 2-month duration. However, you and your provider would determine the best course of treatment, the best course of therapy for your particular goals. And when InTandem ships to your home, it comes with the components that you see here to the left in this image. So 2 shoe-worn sensors that clip onto the outside of your shoes that collect the information about your walking that Kirsten was mentioning. The touchscreen control unit, which has the algorithm, and the wireless headset, which delivers the rhythmic cueing. And so Kirsten will take us through a little bit more about how we landed on these components and how they work together to deliver a session.
Thanks, Chrissy. So after you put on the components, you'll start to walk while the system collects baseline information about your walking on that day. We know that everyone's gait changes depending on things like sleep or what you eat. And so it's important for InTandem to meet you where you are every day. Then the music is introduced at the tempo that you're walking at. So say if you're walking at 60 steps per minute, the music will start at 60 beats per minute. Then, as you continue to walk, The sensors send your walking data to the control unit that you see down here. The music will then speed up or slow down depending on what it reads through your headset based off of your entrainment and your quality of walking. And this is happening continuously and autonomously throughout the session, so you don't need to hold the control unit. The sound will guide you through the entire intervention. And people always want to know what kind of music you might be listening to with InTandem. And we are happy to say that we have the rights to a lot of popular, familiar, and enjoyable music through our partnership with Universal Music Group. And we make that available through genre-based playlists, similar to how you might listen to a radio station of a certain genre. So all you need to do is walk to, say, Stevie Wonder, Frank Sinatra, and let InTandem guide you through the intervention. And we ran a clinical trial with InTandem to study the safety and efficacy of InTandem, and I want to touch on a few highlights of the data. People who used InTandem for 5 weeks, 3 times a week, experienced an average 22% improvement in walking speed. Almost 50% of the folks who used InTandem converted from limited community ambulators to community ambulators. And if you recall from an earlier slide that Chrissy shared, this means that they were more able to safely and independently navigate their broader community, being able to go to the grocery store, see friends, go to the movies. And people also reported a significant improvement in their stroke recovery. Now, I want to mention something important that sometimes has shocked people when we say that, but we want to mention that folks who used InTandem were on average 8.5 years post-stroke, so well into the chronic phase of their stroke recovery.
Wow.
So how did we arrive at such a safe and efficacious product? Well, InTandem was built with and for stroke survivors at every step of the way. Throughout the last several years, we've completed user research with hundreds of stroke survivors. And to give you a sense of a few features that we developed with the stroke survivors, I wanted to highlight a few of these on the screen. For one, the headset. If you look in the box, it's a little hard to tell because they're so discreet, but these are bone conduction headsets. And what that means is that they actually sit in front of your ear, not in the ear, so that you can hear your environment as you're walking around. And this was by far a preference from the folks that we tested the product with. In addition, the charging cables that you use to charge all of the components have magnets at the end of it so that it's easier to connect each of the components to the charging hub with only one hand. I also already mentioned the genre-based playlists. We arranged it like that so that it replicates and mimics the experience of listening to a radio station. And then, of course, there's minimal setup needed to get started, and Wi-Fi is also optional, making it available to be used in all kinds of places. We also validated these features in another study with chronic stroke survivors and found that they were safely able to independently run a session. Now, because we're talking about the product and the data, I also want to mention a few precautions. First, InTandem use should be discontinued if abnormal symptoms are experienced. InTandem should only be used in safe environments, and InTandem should not be used on a treadmill. If you were to receive a prescription for InTandem, you would also receive instructions for use and product labeling where you could find the full safety information. I'll hand it back over to Chrissy.
Thank you. And so with a prescription for InTandem, the kit isn't the only thing you receive. So you would also gain access to InTandem support, which is our wraparound service that is with you every step of the way, from prescription enrollment to payment support, product distribution, and tech and product support. InTandem support is proudly staffed by our MedRhythms employees in our Portland, Maine office. And part of our company mission of creating access to quality care includes working to secure insurance reimbursement and coverage, which we have been actively working on since the launch of the product. And there are currently 3 pathways to accessing InTandem. So the first is through going through commercial insurance, which can take some time because we are pulling each of those prescriptions through on a case-by-case or claim-by-claim basis, but we are seeing some positive determinations. Once we get through to a final determination with an insurance company, some patients may be eligible for one of our several assistance programs, which have the potential to offset any cost sharing that may exist. The second is InTandem is available for private pay. And lastly, if you or someone you know has VA benefit, InTandem can be ordered at no cost for veterans. And so Ralph will make our contact information available, as well as the links to our website and also a video where you can see InTandem in action. And then my contact information is listed here on the screen, which will also be included, I'm sure, Ralph, in the post. But please feel free to reach out to me directly with any specific individual questions you may have. And with that, we are happy to open up, I think, some live questions.
I do see one in the chat. Thank you for sending this in. It says, besides number of steps, days accomplished, time exercised, is there any other metric that the stroke survivor can access to compare and to see if we are improving our gait? First, let me stop sharing since we can just go through that. And so there are a couple other things. One is you can always look back at previous sessions to compare how you did in prior sessions to what you're doing now. You can also see the max tempo that you reached during the session. So that's one way to see, you know, since the tempo of the music will increase as your entrainment and quality of gait is appropriate, that is one way to track how your progress is doing. And then you can also see about how many pauses you took. We know that sometimes people are interested in trying to walk longer and longer times. And so you can also track how many pauses and overall time that you walk during a session. But that's a great question. Thank you for asking that.
He's a user. I
Oh, wonderful.
I saw a post from him the other day about using the product in one of the groups. Actually posted it directly in Stroke Buddies.
Okay, we have another question. The question is, have you tested stroke survivors at various walking abilities? That is a really great question. I'll start with our clinical trial where we recruited folks who had visible asymmetry as assessed by a clinician in their walking, and they were between the walking speeds of 0.5 and 0.79 meters per second. So they were in that limited community ambulators classification for walking speed. However, in the real world, you know, in the commercial setting, we don't, and in other studies, we do not have those inclusion and exclusion criteria. And I'll mention a couple things. One is that we recommend that folks have a reciprocal walking pattern. So that means that they walk with a left, right pattern, and which does not preclude a walker or a cane, but those assistive devices do need to advance with one of the limbs so that you maintain the 1-2-1-2 pattern. Something like a non-reciprocal gait, which has a 3-point walking pattern like cane, step, step, cane, step, step, that would be less appropriate. But of course, your clinician would be the best person to speak to about the appropriateness for your walking. Great question.
Have you done any research or looking into how it might help people get from a 3-point gait to a 2-point gait? Because that's a big stumbling block for a lot of people.
Yes, we have certainly started to think about it and think about how we would want to incorporate that. That is definitely a future goal of ours. But something that I've also learned, and Chrissy, I'd be curious of your clinical expertise here, is that you know, even within a walking bout, people might switch from 2-point to 3-point. And my understanding is that it's more of a continuous sort of experience than always 2-point or 3-point. But Chrissy, maybe you could speak about that from your clinical experience.
Yeah, I think there's some ebb and flow, like you mentioned, Kirsten, that's natural, but clinically speaking, and I'm sure Caitlin talked a bunch about this last week, but our first clinical goal when we're doing RAS is to move patients from a 3-point gait to a 2-point gait because we're bipedal beings, right? So it's so much more natural and efficient and optimized for us to walk in that way, and conversely, much more effortful and less optimized to have that unnatural like cane step or that 3-point gait pattern. So we try to help people get as close to a 2-point gait pattern as possible before we can really start the intensive training that we like to try to do with RAS.
I like to recommend opposition, that they practice opposition. In fact, I have a exercise where I demonstrated at a counter because I think, well, it's all about brain patterning, isn't it? So if you can work offline from InTandem or in advance of getting InTandem to work on opposition, then you're more likely to end up with a 2-point gait. One of the things stroke survivors often don't make the connection between is that's how babies crawl, and that's how we learn to walk. And so practicing opposition can help with that process.
From a data side, I'm also really excited to, once InTandem has been out in the world for a while, see all of the data and maybe think about phenotypes or, groups of people and how their walking pattern starts and then how it shifts over time within InTandem. But we can only do that with a lot of data. So it's definitely something to keep our eye on in the future.
Okay. Anybody else got any questions? Well, I mean, if you want, I can talk about it and my experience with it, because I had pretty positive experience with it.
Ralph, I actually just got one more message from asking about gait as a vital sign. So this is actually a really great point. It is sometimes walking and gait is sometimes referred to as the 6th vital sign. However, I've heard that one of the other vital signs might be depromoted. So what number that is, I don't really know. But if you recall from the slide that Chrissy showed, and maybe I can pull it up here, we talk about gait because of how important it is, not only for improving someone's ability to move around the environment, but also it's very related to non-walking health-related statuses. So, for instance, walking speed and quality relate to your risk of falls, hospitalizations, institutionalizations, functional dependence, and quality of life. And so you can even think of walking as an indicator for non-walking health as well. And so there's been a lot of literature written about gait as the 6th vital sign because of its predictive capability for future health status. So that's another reason that, we focus on it that you may not think about, but there is the citation down here, walking speed, the 6th vital sign. We'd be happy to share our information on this, and maybe we can post the citation for this because it's a really, you don't really think about it sometimes because for a lot of people it's so automatic, but that walking is definitely indicative of health features in other domains as well. Great point. Thank you.
I can take this next one, Kirsten. It looks like we have a question about international usage and availability. So currently InTandem is only available in the United States, and that's because of our FDA label, but also our music licensing. And so we don't currently have the ability to provide InTandem outside of the United States. And next question is, I would like to try it. How do you, I think, ask about it is the question. So what we'll do also is, Ralph, we will send you our information packet, which has the enrollment form attached. So again, if there's specific questions, please reach out to me directly. If you have questions on which pathway for accessing InTandem you would like to pursue. But certainly we'll share the information kit, which can be brought to your doctor, and has the enrollment form right on there. So they would fill that enrollment form out, send it into our team, which would come into InTandem support, and we would take it from there.
And I'll put in the description below the video when I post it on YouTube, I will put your contact information, the link to the video you referred to, the intake or question information. Anything you send me, I'm happy to put there. So those of you out in YouTube land, right below that says see more, 3 little dots, click those and you'll get a big screen full of information.
Great. Thank you, Ralph.
We're also happy to speak with your doctor or your physical therapist if you'd like to have us talk to them about the product or the science. We're always available for helping out there.
I see some questions, Kirsten, about the data.
Oh, thank you. Let's see, any data to show how long it takes to go from 3-point to 2-point? In daytime, I walk without a cane, but nighttime I use a cane. I want to be 2-point at night, but people assume I'm drunk due to my gait. Thank you for sharing that. I do not have any data on that. I would rely on our clinician, Chrissy, maybe to speak from your clinical experience, but we do not have any data from InTandem on that.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's not a very satisfying answer because it's completely individualized. So it really depends on, the patient, the walking pattern, like you're saying, like our participant is saying here, it's fluctuating from daytime to nighttime. And so that would be something that I would take up in physical therapy and explain. I'm in a 3-point pattern at night. I'd like to try to move that to a 2-point. And it might be strength, it might be endurance. Certainly InTandem can help to continue the 2-point gait because of the driving of the rhythmic cueing. But as far as moving from 3-point to 2-point, it's totally individualized.
Great. And then we have a question about the music. What is the difference between just walking to music and using InTandem? Can my relative use music for her walk with her streaming service subscription? This is a great question. We are all very familiar with music. A lot of us listen to it every day, and so it's a natural question. But I'll break it down into 2 reasons why walking to a commercial music playlist is different from walking to InTandem. First is the music that we use, and then second is how we deliver it. So the music that we use, like we mentioned, is from Universal Music Group's partnership. And we screen and validate each song that we use, because not every song is appropriate for use in rhythmic auditory stimulation. As the name suggests, we're really focused on the rhythm. And so we want to make sure that the beat is salient, that the rhythm is consistent across the song. For instance, there isn't any crazy guitar solo that changes the tempo of the music in the middle of it. And then it has to have enough power. It can't be a slow ballad. We need something with groove and something that motivates you a bit. And so we have a proprietary screening process to whittle down the music catalog to only the most appropriate songs, and those are the ones that we include in InTandem. Importantly, I want to mention that familiar, enjoyable music, that emotional component of listening to music, while that's inherent in the music that we use, that is not part of the mechanism of action. We think of the enjoyment of the music and preference as a part of adherence or engagement with the product. Using a metronome could facilitate improvement in gait, but it would be hard to motivate folks to walk to a metronome for the course of a prescription. And so we think about the emotional and relationship you have to music as part of the engagement aspect, not the mechanism of action. And then for the second point of how we deliver the music, We mentioned in that cycle graph that as the algorithm, which is built based off of our clinical understanding of gait in the brain, as the algorithm assesses your entrainment and quality of walking, we time stretch the music to make it go faster or slower. So really, we're time scaling the music. So whereas your relative would have to change songs or change playlists to get to a different beats per minute, we are stretching the song autonomously without you having to do anything, so that you're listening to Stevie Wonder, just a little bit more sped up or a little bit more slowed down, without reducing the auditory fidelity at all. The quality of the music is still pristine, and we change the tempo so subtly, sometimes it's imperceptible. So that is one way that we're able to subconsciously draw folks to walk faster or slower, depending on what the sensors and the algorithm determine. And then lastly, about how we deliver the music is the safety guardrails. I mentioned that the algorithm will change based off of will change the tempo of the music based on how you are in training and the quality of walking. And those two are really safety guardrails that we lean on. InTandem will not progress the tempo of the music unless the quality of walking is appropriate. And we're looking at variability and asymmetry in your walking, whereas the commercial playlist subscription would not have that ability. We are making sure that you are not speeding up while risking the quality of your walking. We want to train both throughout the session, and that will lead to ultimately better, more sustainable walking.
Yeah, I just to add, sorry, Ralph, just real quickly, I think Kirsten's last point there is really the difference maker, and it's the safety, right? We want to make sure that InTandem is meeting our users where they are. If there was a med change or if you didn't sleep well the night before, the product will meet you where you are on that day. So if, 2 days ago, your baseline was 70 beats per minute, but today it's 60, a regular streaming service would never be able to pick up on those nuances. And so that's the importance of InTandem coming to you as a kit with the components really working together to make sure that, yes, we're helping you walk faster, but also doing that in a way that's really controlling for safety.
I have a couple of things I can add as a user. I tested the product twice, and you've mentioned the metronome. What you didn't mention was that if you get off of entrainment, the metronome gets louder, and as you get back on, it diminishes. And as a user, at least this user, when I started getting, if I got off, it bothered me. The first thing I wanted to do was make sure I got back on entrainment, get that darn thing down so I could listen to it wasn't like drowning out the music, but it's a very important cue that you're off. And so that's something that if you have just a regular metronome on your phone, it's not gonna play with the music. It's not going to get louder and softer. I found that really useful. I don't know I believe I was told that you want something like 2/4 or 4/4 beats for entrain. Is that still true? Okay.
Yep. That's the 1-2-1-2 pattern that we talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
2/4 or 4/4. When I tested, didn't have the music license yet, and so things were not real limited, but they were limited not to the thousands of songs that are available now. And I really liked Motown because of the strong beat, and I found that I very much wanted to hit the downbeat every time with my affected foot, and the music really motivated me and kept me in sync to do that. Another thing that I observed was that, not distraction's the wrong word. I focused on the music, the entrainment, and staying in step, and that kept me from overthinking my walking. As stroke survivors, we have Chrissy nodding her head because she's heard this a bunch of times. We overthink everything, and my when I was in the rehab hospital, my therapist said to me the first day, it took me a few hours to process it. She said, Ralph, we're trying to learn how to forget how to walk. So, what we're trying to do as stroke survivors, and it's very difficult, is get to where it becomes more natural, where you don't have to think about every step. You're not overthinking. And I felt just, again, I don't have a better word than distraction. Focus. It caused me to focus on the music. And I have no idea how you can speed up the music 10% and it doesn't change the pitch, or you're not aware of it at all. I don't know who wrote that algorithm, but it's the bomb. And I also, one more thing, I could sometimes notice that I pay a lot of attention when I walk, and I've walked a lot. So I could notice when I was getting sped up slightly, and I never felt like it forced me beyond where I was at. It pushed me a little bit, but it met me where I was at and didn't impose any kind of thing that I felt was uncomfortable or unsafe. So there you have it.
Those are great points, Ralph. And the last thing that you said made me think of a concept that might be familiar to folks and the physical therapists that you might work with about the principles of neuroplasticity. So how do we retrain the brain? Well, we have to follow the principles of neuroplasticity. Some of them are that the intervention needs to be individualized, it needs to be progressive, and it needs to be challenging. And it's sometimes hard to find interventions that can hit all of those at the same time. And with InTandem, we have hit all of those. It's individualized, like we talk about. It meets you where you are on that day. It's progressive, so it will, based off of how you're walking, it will change what it's guiding you to do. And then it's challenging, just like you mentioned, Ralph. It will push you a little bit, but not too much. We have those safety guardrails in there. So thanks for priming me to talk about the brain a little bit there, Ralph.
Sorry, I'm fighting my cat at the moment. He's trying to push he likes to zoom. He's trying to push the screen around. Anyway, that's why I'm batting at things. Any more questions? Six, nope.
Any others?
So anybody else is welcome to ask any questions they might have. Oh. Well, you also mentioned links in previous events in the series. Yes, I can mention that. Yeah, as a part of the information below the post, I will put a link to the playlist where I have a neurologic music therapy playlist, and these the 5 presentations that we've done with MedRhythms, who I want to thank very, very much, the company and all the individuals. I'll put the playlist there. There'll be the top 5 in the playlist because it's done by most recent. And also we will send out both MedRhythms and Stroke Buddies. You won't get 2. There'll be a coordinated effort to send a follow-up email that will provide any resources that we want to put in there. And we'll also, we on our side, we typically send you registered, sorry you couldn't make it, here's the YouTube link thing, and then they can find all the resources also if they watch it under the description. So that's the best plan we have for connecting people to everything.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Ralph, for having us.
Well, thank you for coming and for sharing your knowledge.
Absolutely. Hope to hear from you all.
Pardon?
I said, hope to hear from you all, the participants that are on.
Well, it worked. It worked for me. I thought, that I'm 16 years and my gait's I would have to say it did improve it somewhat. That's a difficult thing because not because of neuroplasticity, not because of 16 years, but because I worked hard on it during that time. And my gait is probably better than well, certainly better than some percentage of stroke survivors. I don't know what that is, more than half for sure. So neuroplasticity lasts a lifetime. It might get a little harder the farther out you are, but that's not a reason not to pursue it. And you know, I've done experiments throwing a tennis ball at 11 years with my affected hand, and for 30 days, because people were saying, well, they believe that the doctor's stuff about all of your gains are going to be in the first 6, 12, or some even goes as long as 18 months. Everybody out there who doesn't know the answer to this, doctors say that because of there is something close to the insult or injury, stroke, called spontaneous healing. And that's the period that typically lasts. It's different in everybody. And if you're out there and you haven't got to acceptance of what's happened to you, I would recommend you do that because you have more neuroplasticity in the beginning. And I hate to see people who aren't playing the cards that they were unfortunately dealt, and letting some of that neuroplasticity go. You know, we're all members of a club we wish we didn't belong to, but that's no reason to not move on with your life. All right, I'll get down off my soapbox now.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Ralph.
Well, thank you
Excited
both.
to keep the conversation going, and I'll see you on the next one then.
Okay, great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Do all you can with what you have, in the time you have, in the place you are. Do all you can. Do all you can.